from the Planning Committee? Guess that's me, is it? Since Victoria's not here. Unless we got a volunteer. Has he got an operation? He didn't come anyway. So we had the Planning Committee, and it was quite an active discussion on the oil and gas exploration activities, and subsequently, as you would have all diligently read my chairman's report, you will note, I should do a quiz really, shouldn't I, and see if you have read it. You will note that we had a meeting with the oil guys. Very good meeting, I thought. We didn't agree on much, but we agreed to be polite to each other. So that discussion continues. We received a whole lot of other reports about, we had one interesting discussion about outstanding water bodies. You'll all recall that. That ended in a bit of a mess because probably we couldn't get our heads around which was outstanding and which wasn't outstanding, and certainly the Tēnā Whenua reps thought that all water was tonga and all should be considered as outstanding. It was hard to pick it out. We also had a good discussion on the moratorium on releasing GMOs, and we received from Simpson and Greer report on oil and gas activities. I thought we talked about more than that, but that's what's on my report. So do we have someone to receive that report? Paul? What else? Not going to receive that report?
No, I'm going to vote against it.
That's a good one. Someone else to receive it. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bevan. All those in favour of receiving that report?
Aye.
Aye. Against?
Well, against. I would have spoken anyway.
Oh, you want to speak? Yeah, come on, speak. Yeah, good on you. Come on.
Thank you, Chair. The proposed plan change oil and gas exploration, I just think we've gone off half-cocked here. My preference would be to send it back to the Regional Planning Committee and have perhaps a more in-depth discussion around the challenges that a prohibition will place in a plan change. I believe our regulations are inadequate, absolutely. Couldn't agree with that more. We're not set up to deal with what potentially will be a raft of applications coming at some stage in the next couple of years with the block offer, etc., that's out there. And we need to be better at dealing with the issue, but not in the form of a prohibition at this stage, because frankly all that will do is tie a whole lot of resource up fighting a word just because of that one word, prohibition. I believe that we have an opportunity to use this signal to engage with the industry and say, look guys, and consult with them in a collaborative way, because frankly they're not going away. There's too much money at stake. They've got more money than we've got. I don't believe that's a reason not to challenge the status quo. I get that. But frankly, because we're going to start with the word prohibition in the plan change, we'll be tied up in the one plan cost $11 million to get to the end of. I think this is probably something similar. And I can't see the sense in spending the first $100,000 if we're not prepared to spend the last $100,000, because frankly we'll all get burned off in the process. So I have no choice but to vote against this and offer a word of caution to my colleagues that we're embarking on a journey that is going to end in tears, in my view, because we won't be talking to the companies about the issues, we'll be talking to their lawyers about stopping us or whatever they think they're going to do. And that one word, prohibition, it's as simple as that. Shouldn't be there.
Thank you. These things are supposed to be for double debate, and I'm really keen on that. I'm sorry I didn't go through that process right. I'm going to hold that vote. So are there any other views on this? And I do want to debate this now, doubly, second time, third time probably. Councillor?
Yeah, I'd like to welcome welcome Councillor Wilson's thoughts on this issue because they're quite valid. However, I would take a different view and say at the end of the day we are here to represent the people of Hawke's Bay. We're not here to represent some foreign offshore multinational corporation. I believe that the people of Hawke's Bay want us to take this direction. They want us to go down this path. They certainly don't want to see our water being put at risk. So I personally cannot see any other way of dealing with this issue apart from use of the word prohibition, because it sends a very direct message to the oil and gas companies that we don't want them here.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, Councillor Bevan.
Chair, I'll speak very briefly as well. I'll support the motion, and I hear what Councillor Wilson says. However, given that we're planning to do a limited plan change and there will be public submissions, the people who he's concerned about will tie us up in knots for years in the courts, actually have the opportunity to participate, and we get to hear them and engage with them in any case through that plan change process. So I'm satisfied to support this.
Any other comment? Before I comment, I love the word prohibition. Oh, sorry. Did you want to comment, Debbie? No, you go first. Oh, well, I'll go since I have started. I love the word prohibition, and we want to be very clear. This is a prohibition for drilling for oil and gas in our aquifer or in the water bodies that contribute to our aquifer. I don't want that to happen. I don't think a large section of our community want that to happen. And if that means we have to fight for our community, we have to fight. And hopefully we can negotiate that we don't, but if we do, we do.
Thanks, Chair. What I'm hearing from Councillor Wilson is let's just discuss this a little bit further, and I have a couple of my colleagues around the table suggesting that they believe the community wants this. Well, I don't think that we have taken this discussion to the whole community. We've heard the squeaky wheel part of the community, but in terms of the wider community benefits that could come from oil and gas exploration in this community, I don't think it's a discussion we have had, so I don't believe we have the mandate to make that decision. And I'm wondering if you could perhaps take these recommendations separately so that we don't need to outrightly vote against the RPC.
I guess I am so far out there on this issue that I'm just incredulous that we need to discuss it. For us to be even concerned with throwing the tiny few crumbs that this region has to offer to the international oil market to satisfy a dying industry that is daily injuring the planet, the fact that we even have to discuss it, I find appalling. I would love to vote on this separately.
To note, it's not a prohibition on oil drilling per se in our ruhi. It is a prohibition very precisely on the water bodies or that contribute to our aquifer, on the aquifer itself. And Tom's position, personal position, is a little bit different to that, but this resolution, this paper, states is a compromise. Any other? Do we? What's the feeling about we take it separately? I can't see any point in taking it separately. So we have a mover and a seconder. So I want to take a vote on accepting the recommendations in the from this committee, from the Regional Planning Committee. Do you want to speak, Councillor?
Well, Mr. Chair, I think if I could provide some contribution in regard to splitting the recommendation, I think it would be very useful to councillors. I'm sure a number of our councillors won't want to be turning down the opportunity for water bodies determination. It'd be great to see where people stand on GMOs. And
You want to take them all separately?
I'd be more than happy to do so.
I don't care about that sort of thing. I want to make sure everyone gets their say here and everyone gets heard, and if Councillor Curtin's late, that's fine with me. So what he's suggesting is, and Tom's actually agrees with that, so we're getting a bit of a consensus here, that we take one, that's the proposed, and 4, you want the oil one and the GMO one separately and the rest together.
Well, all we're doing, Mr. Chair, is that we're noting that the reports were received for 4.1, 4.2, 4.1, 4.2.
Oh, that's exactly right.
And we could easily address those separately. So I'm happy to move that we receive the report noted at 4.1 in regard to outstanding water bodies.
I think it's a good process because then we're clear on each issue, each one. So you're moving that?
I'll move that.
4.1. Outstanding. Yeah.
Oh, that's actually 3.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm good.
We're moving sec for 1, 2 and 3. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Against. I think we should note it. Your absolutely. So all those in favour again, raise their hand.
Resolutions 1, 2 and 3, or are we talking about 4.1, 4.2 and 4.3?
Yeah. The 4 points. The actual notice receiving. So it's 1, 2 and 3 of the. Yeah. So all those in favour? Aye. Against? Will register Councillor Wilson's negative. Okay. Negative vote. A nay. Councillor Wilson's nay. So we ended up taking them as, right?
Sorry, but I need to catch up with that. I'm sorry. My understanding was we were taking them separately. We were taking 4.1, 2 and 3, and then
we moved
we were
on.
going to take. So did we vote on both of them? So we haven't voted on resolutions 1, 2, and 3, 3.1 and 3.2.
Yeah. 4 points. Yeah, well,
I thought we were voting on 1, 2, and 3.
it's 4.1, 2, and
1, 2, and 3.
One, two, three, and we haven't done 4. Okay. Righto then. So then we've done that 1, 2 and 3. You are happy with that, Councillor? Just, okay. So we need a mover for 4, which is 4.1. I thought we'd need a different mover if we're going to. We don't? Okay, we've got a mover. We've already got a mover. Who were those movers? You? Do? Okay, so we now have a mover and a seconder for 4, which is 4.1, 2 and 3. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Well, unanimous. Oh, well done.
Just noting I did receive the reports, Steve. Give you a view on GMO if you voted.
Okay, good one. Right, oh well, we got to there, eh? Oh, I think I mucked it up actually. So we'll move to recommendations from the Environmental and Service Committee. Tom, you're on.
I will take the report as read. There were 3 major items. Gravel management, which I don't recall generating any particular controversy. That was approved with a fair amount of discussion. The interim chief executive appointment similarly was routinely approved. We received all these various reports. The one item that I'm aware of that has raised some issues is the pine forest harvest at Tutira. And Mr. Chairman, I would just suggest that you recognize Paul to indicate what his concerns with this are. We've all been communicated, I think, about this, but he's raised a series of issues. Mike has responded, so I think we should have a little bit of further discussion about those recommendations.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea too. Paul?
Yeah, thank you. Yep, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tom. As I said in my email, I'm quite happy for the roads to be put in, which is recommendations 7 and 8. Unfortunately, my email I was looking at the minutes from the Environment Services Committee, which is where I got the numbering all wrong. So yeah, I'm happy with 7 and 8 to go ahead, because at the end of the day, it's not a bad thing to have the roads given some time to settle and everything else. What I do have concerns about though is points 9 and 10. To my mind, without having thought through the strategic benefits or otherwise of the forest block, we'd be selling ourselves short if we missed an opportunity to help with the fixing of Lake Tutira. Now, I'm aware that the blocks have to be harvested at some stage, but I need to assure myself, and I think we all need to assure ourselves that we're doing this in the most beneficial manner to the lake. And I think some sort of a strategic plan would do this. And I don't think there's any hurry as such to put in place recommendations 9 and 10 and have them put into effect. But by thinking about the harvest strategically, I think we could allay some concerns that the community may have about the harvesting of the forestry blocks just by clear filling them. So therefore I propose that we leave recommendations 9 and 10 on the table, just pending the completion of some sort of strategic plan around the future of the Tutira forestry blocks. And this could then be incorporated into some sort of strategic plan about how we're going to deal with the lake itself, which is something we haven't even started the process on yet. I don't think that it will delay, by doing that, I don't think it's going to delay the harvest of the block at any rate, but I think it gives us much greater, or certainly will give me much greater clarity in my mind as to exactly why we're doing it and what are the benefits to the lake itself.
Mr. AD, what's your comment on that?
I'm afraid I don't agree with that. I believe that the staff have agreed or have set out here very clearly how we will seek professional advice on this. And yeah, I'm feeling really that I suppose, to be brutally honest, this is a real, you know, I feel that this is the governance getting far too involved in operational issues associated with Tutira. I believe I've set out my views, and yeah, I stand by those and believe that the approach that we have proposed originally does exactly what Councillor Bailey is asking or seeking, and that is protecting Lake Tutira.
Councillor, we'll run into a debate here because you have a very strong view.
Yep.
Otherwise, so I want you to respond. You know, what do you think about that?
Unfortunately, Chair, the paper that was put up to the Environment Service Committee originally only discussed different options for where the roading into the forestry blocks goes, which is fine in itself. That needs to be done, and I didn't have any challenge with that, and that's why I don't have any challenge with going ahead with the roading now. What I do have a challenge with, and which wasn't made clear in the paper that came before the Environment Service Committee, was around what is the strategic direction we want to take with respect to the forestry blocks. There are a number of different options on how to harvest. There are a number of different benefits that can come from delaying the harvest a couple of years or whatever. And they were canvassed in the paper that I got from Mr. Purley, simply because I'm not a forestry expert by any stretch of the imagination. And I think he's raised a number of valid questions that we should be considering and looking for answers from. Now, it could well be that at the end of the day, the approach taken by staff at the moment is a perfectly valid one, and that is the way we should proceed. But unless we have a discussion about the different options, then I think we're selling ourselves short.
First, a question to Mike, through you, Mr. Chair. What other forestry blocks are there if we were looking at a holistic strategy for dealing with the Tutira region, however we're going to define that? Would there be a lot of other forestry blocks in there? Where does this one sort of rank in the?
I can't answer where it ranks. I'm aware of other forestry blocks. In fact, there is one currently being harvested at the moment on the other side of the lake. The proposed road will allow for the harvest of a block that's currently on private land. In addition, but I can't tell you what's further up the catchment, and I mean, as I've said in my response, the catchment is over 3,000 hectares. But we also have a 140 odd hectare high UMF Manuka forest in the same catchment. So with regard to sort of spreading our risk and minimising that risk of erosion from the HBRC owned 430 odd hectares, we have done a substantial amount of planting and retirement basically from erosion. Further up the catchment, our land management staff have been working with farmers up there for a number of years, and there has been some planting up there, but I cannot sort of quantify that off the top of my head. So hopefully that sort of provides a view, and you know, we are dealing with this forest with a very, very small part of the whole catchment, and you know, I think it's got to be taken into in the context of the whole of the catchment.
So as a follow-up then, my main takeaway from the exchange and what Mr. Purley is suggesting is that he's arguing, and Paul's arguing, that we need to take a sort of holistic approach at this catchment where we have a variety of competing interests and options. You, Mr. Chairman, have said this is our, you know, I think in your view, it's our number one hot spot, that you're looking to see a strategy articulated for dealing with that. I don't know, we've never really discussed what the time frame might be for settling on what that strategy might be. I'm aware that there are a lot of discussions underway with various parties involved there. But I guess my question is, if it were to take, let's say, 6 months to arrive at here's what we think that whole picture needs to look like, here is how we want to deal with our forestry assets in that context, which may or may not lead to other replanting strategies or whatever, would delaying what is proposed in 9 and 10 here really adversely affect anything? I mean, if it were ultimately to be resolved in the context of here's the master plan for Tutira, here's how we want to relate with Guthrie Smith, here's how we want to relate with landowners up the catchment, here's what we want to do with the lake itself, here's what we want to do with the forestry, and it's always been my impression that that's what we wanted to eventually be able to say to the community, and the management of this asset should fit into that. It doesn't seem like it should take us forever to resolve what our approach overall should be, and this should be nested in it. And so unless there was some really material disadvantage to delaying 9 and 10, I guess I'd be inclined to support what Paul's concern is.
Can I put that conversely, passing 9 and 10, would that adversely affect, given that it does say they're going to accept expert advice, so we've got time, whatever we do, with 9 and 10. So if you pass it, you don't ruffle the figures, although I want to have a serious conversation about governance, because Mr. Adey, let me tell you, I am not impressed with the way forestry is harvesting, and so I'm not impressed. And I'm like Councillor Bailey. I don't know anything about forestry, and I walk in and I find out that the Canadians do it differently from us, and that actually our foresters are a long way behind international standards of harvesting forests. That's what I'm discovering as a total amateur out there. So, perhaps governance has got to get involved in, and proof's in the pudding. We've watched little communities like Mahia get decimated because of irresponsible harvesting of forest, and Wairau Beach gets completely covered in excess tree slash which comes down. So I think perhaps somebody else has to have a good look at the way foresters and forestry is doing things. But you do say here, 9, that you will seek expert advice on not only on, I hope it's just not on price, but on harvesting. Perhaps that's what we should do, because we do want to have this as a holistic approach to the lake, and we do want to minimise risk, and I'm sure you're doing that. But Councillor, do you see that 9 and 10 maybe, if we did pass them, does it really affect? Do we have time to, or you want them out?
Yeah, that's why I suggested, Chair, that we just lay them on the table in the time being, pending completion of some sort of strategic plan for the forestry blocks.
And how does that affect? Does that have a negative effect on operations?
Well, that was a question Mr. Adey, Tom asked Mr. Adey.
The key here, and certainly in 10, I've outlined very clearly the risk to sediment, and that needs to be taken into account. The process we plan to work through there would be to work with the forest industry, so that is Hawke's Bay Forestry Group, and environmental, the parts of those forest companies, and to seek their view on what is reasonable and practical in minimising any risk to that lake. In terms of a sort of big picture long-term plan, if we are to harvest next summer, and that's what we certainly strongly recommend, that we have the ability to make that decision, depending on log prices and harvest resources at the time, because they are becoming under pressure. So prices will inevitably go up from roading contractors or forestry roading contractors and harvesting companies. And we need to be in a position, if we are to replant in the 2018 winter, of ordering plants probably by September, if not August this year. So we have got very little time to make sort of decisions on this, and yeah, we are confident that working through this with on the ground practical experts from the forest companies, that we are going to arrive at I suppose a practical option for harvesting, minimising any risk, well, harvesting and replanting, minimising any risk of sediment entering that lake. It's not to say that the risk will disappear, because if we get a major storm, where there will inevitably be sediment from that lake, both from forestry and from grazed areas. So, you know, we can't eliminate it, but we can minimise it from this block.
Councillor Purman.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I hear the comment you've made, Mike, about, you know, the conflict here between management and governance roles. And I would normally have some concerns about that as well, but this is a very public site. We know this is an incredibly sensitive environment around Lake Tutera. I'm not the least bit convinced that putting this area back into Pines is the right way to go, and I think that we owe it to ourselves to have a closer look at what's being planned here and be satisfied that we're doing the right thing in Tutera, both in terms of the harvest management and in terms of the replant and what that might look like. And I don't think it's going to impact on the timing of this, because I don't see why staff can't come back with some more information on the issues that Councillor Bailey's raised to satisfy us that the plan is a good plan. And I'd be happy to support that we leave 9 and 10 laying on the table in the meantime.
Yeah. Can I just add, Mr. Chairman, that 13 deals with bringing the replanting plan back to council, and that is already part of the plan for this whole thing. So, we have thought through all of these issues. I can assure you we have not have not sort of omitted consideration of all of these issues as part of our development of our thinking in with regard to harvest of Lake Tutera forest.
Just, Mr. Chair, if I could ask Mike, if we did defer 9 and 10, that is, leave them on the table until we get some broader picture brought before council. In 9, there's in the first line it says construction of associated infrastructure. Is that different infrastructure than is indicated in 8, that is construction of the road?
Yes, that will be, the road takes us so far, and it takes us to Papakiri Stream, so we can actually build the bridge plus a little bit past that. Then the road needs to carry on from the end of that to the Tutera forest.
Yeah, no, I get
plus I'm talking about internal access roading and skid sites. So all of that is included in that infrastructure.
Sorry,
yeah.
let's be clear.
Yeah.
So you're saying all of this wiggly road you've talked about is in 8, in item 8, covered by that?
The bit of road that gets us to the bridge and constructing the bridge.
That was meant by 8?
That plus a little bit is what's meant by 8.
Sure.
The remainder is
in 9.
9, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Can you then answer the question, if we approved 8, getting on with that bit, but let lay on the table 9, would that seriously compromise the timely construction of the implementation of infrastructure?
That is programmed for next summer, but to be fair, I'm still not clear on exactly what you are seeking before you would actually agree to 9 and 10.
Can I enlighten you? What we're saying is the councillors, in proposing 8, 9 and 10, are saying we don't want to give a green light and in principle signal to staff around that until we've seen a big picture, and I would suggest in 3 months we should be able to bring back to council a plan, and it seems to me that it doesn't actually impact on what you're going to do anyway. So would that help you overcome us meddling politicians in your life?
No, because I'm not clear. The replanting plan is for the 114 hectares of forest. What you seem to be, or the message I'm getting, is that you want a plan for, 3,000 hectares of the whole of the catchment. So can I have some
getting a
clarity
good
on
idea.
that?
I wouldn't mind getting a reasonable idea about the impacts of forestry and other land disturbance in that catchment in relation to the lake in particular. So that's
Sure.
probably an indication. I'm not suggesting we go and do thousands of dollars, but you've indicated already in your responses that we actually don't know a hell of a lot about who's up there, how much is there, and what's the likely impact if everyone decided to join us and cut their trees down as we were cutting them down.
I don't personally know. I'm sure that information is much more readily available if I ask staff throughout the organisation.
Could we have that?
If that's what you're looking for, I mean, let's be clear that is a sort of very high-level overview, plus the detailed plans of the 114 hectares that we are talking about. If that's what you're looking for, that's probably manageable within the 3 months. If you are looking for a much bigger strategic plan for the whole of the lake catchment, I think that, to be fair, that is much longer than 3 months.
Well, excuse me, Mr. Chair. I think we're trying to get a sense of how big the issue is in regard to forestry and cutting thereof in the catchment over the 3,000 acres or hectares. You know, how big a task would it be to take a photo and measure out how many forests we've got there and what the impact is likely to be if what they're talking to the owners and saying, when are you going to harvest?
That can be done, absolutely. Yeah, that's no problem.
Chair, if it helps the discussion, I'm wondering if there's a little bit of conflation of the discussion around. We have discussed the concept of an integrated catchment management plan for the lake or for the catchment that includes the lake, which isn't something we could deliver in 3 months, and certainly wouldn't go down to the level of detail that is required for this issue. And that is something that we're looking to put into the Freshwater Improvement Fund bid process that we've got running at the moment. So if you're looking for something that's focused particularly on forestry and this particular forest block, that's kind of a different step.
And before I go to you, Deb, and before I go to anyone, we're getting a little bit off track here, talking about the catchment. I think what councillors, and particularly Councillor Bailey, is really concerned, and so am I, is that we have a little forest up there. We're going to put a road in, and we're all happy about putting the road in, but we want to make sure that the harvesting of our forest is done leading edge, world leading edge, so that we are an example to all the people. We just don't want to just cut it down. I mean, and I think councillors want to learn more about that and understand that better. Certainly I do. Because of the disasters I'm seeing all around Hawke's Bay and the way that we are cutting down our forests. So what we would like to do is be the example in our forest of leading edge. And Councillor Bailey is not convinced that we are, and I'm not either, actually. I have some sympathies with this thing. I just want to make sure that we can get to that and have a discussion and understand that we are doing this absolutely leading edge so that we're an example to the rest of the catchment. So I'll just take, Debbie was first, Tom.
Thanks, Chair. Question for you, Paul. So at this stage with this this harvesting, we're looking at an $800,000 shortfall in the long-term plan, and if these two numbers are left out that Councillor Bailey's requesting, what are the implications on our long-term plan for you?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I mean, that's just one of the many revenue streams in a long-term plan. Yes, it will have an impact because it's planned that money falls to the bottom line. But there's be a lot of balls in the air when you're looking at the long-term plan. This one is an easy delivery if indeed the trees are harvested on within the time period that Mike's put out.
But if we're not?
If we're not, then the funding line on the LTP has that exposure. Yeah.
2.8.
Well, over a 2 or 3 year time frame from memory.
Tom.
So, looking at item 13, which Mike has pointed out requires or talks about a replanting plan being brought back in July or September, if that were amended to include a harvesting and replanting plan, then we would be getting at what I think a number of us are raising here. We'd be getting a little more detail on what is the approach here. It does seem to me that we have taken a approach here that says our primary objective is to optimize short-term financial return, and that's what's driving this. Other commentators have raised that there are other values we might want to seek, and presumably a harvesting plan would address those and say yes, no, no, we shouldn't wait 50 years. We should do it at present, maturity of the trees, et cetera, et cetera. The staff has already made that conclusion. They feel we should do it now because that's the time to pocket the money. But I do think we need these other assurances that Paul has raised, that Peter has raised. I think Neil has the same concern. I do, that we need to see a little more. You certainly do, Mr. Chairman, as to exactly how might this harvesting occur. Maybe the result of this further few months of looking at it is to reaffirm now is the time to do it. And the issue is, how do we do it? Or we may relitigate, is it the time to do it? But I think at least we want to relook at the how, and why not just delete 9 and 10 and add to number 13 that we would like to see a harvesting and replanting plan brought back to the committee, the Environment Committee, in July. I'd be happy to move something along those lines.
Could you live with that? Could you live with that?
Sorry.
You
Sorry. Let me take you back to the process that we were proposing to go through. We were proposing to go to the key forest companies in Hawke's Bay and ask them for a proposal to harvest this land, and that proposal would be treated upon its merits and include our weighted process of assessing how they're going to manage their environmental issues associated with that harvest. That, to me, is the best way still of getting a harvest plan for this, and that is by seeking that from those forest companies that are able to harvest this. For us to provide some way of harvesting, I think will provide one way, but it won't necessarily provide us with a full range of options for harvesting that we can then work with a successful contractor or harvesting company to work it through. So one way forward for this would be, though, that we do work through that tender process as proposed under 9 and 10, and that the outcome of that, or the proposal, is brought back to this committee, and that the successful forest company, or the proposed successful forest company, sits down and explains it in a lot more detail to either the Environment Services Committee or Council. So that would make a whole lot more sense to me than us working through our own harvest plan and the foresters seeing something completely different as being the best practice.
It's the same compromise, isn't it, really?
Yes.
So I mean, if it were clear that the council would have an opportunity to satisfy ourselves about the adequacy of that plan, then we're sort of getting to the same endpoint there. So I wouldn't really object to that, as long as right now the way this is written is we're handing this off to the chief executive to just proceed. And
Mike's going to get some words to that effect.
so if we build that review in,
Just before we go in there, so that would say agrees that the forest proposals received together, instead of the TENS committee comes back to the regional planning, probably the environmental services committee, which is the next one. Could we?
They're not delegated to make decisions.
So it has to come back to the regional council. Yeah, the regional council then. So you see that on 11, number 11, recommendations will be considered by the tenders committee. Instead of tenders committee, it's said by the regional council. So, and that would send a signal. You could then, Mr. Adey, send a signal that to these forestry companies that we are looking for innovation here to protect our lake and to send a signal to the rest of our community. Councillor Curtin, have you?
Mr. Chair, I appreciate Mike's issues there and the timing. Now I appreciate it a bit more. And I'm seeing that item 10 actually feeds into, I think it's a good suggestion from Councillor Belford that we insert in 13, note the staff anticipate the harvesting and replanting plan. I think that should be adopted. And that would enable 10 to feed into that plan. What the issue I think takes...
No, he can't wear that. He can't.
Well, I know. I hear what he's saying. I know what he's saying. I'm suggesting and asking Mike, how would you feel if we in fact did adopt 10, but we actually left 9 in abeyance until after that plan comes forward. So you've got all your preliminary work, but the ultimate decision for council is the timing and timing of the harvest. So proceed with everything else except 9 and inserting harvest as a part of that 13. And you get everything you've done that you want to. It doesn't interfere with the cash flow scenarios. It's simply leaving the ultimate decision back to council in association with the report or the plan under 13.
So if I could capture that, the resolution would be, we, setting aside all the other recommendations in here for the moment, but under Tatira, we'd be endorsing 7, 8, 10. We'd modify 11 to refer to the council as opposed to the tenders committee. And in 13, we'd add harvesting and replanting plan. So that would allow Mike to go forward with putting
There's tenders out.
a inquiry out, collecting all that information, looking elsewhere as we may wish to Canada or whatever. That process can get underway. All we've done is remove the decision-making item 9, and we've said bring it back to the council
For an ultimate decision.
when we've had this work done. Is
Mr.
that,
Adey, can you live with that?
I think so, yes.
Can you live with that?
Yeah, I can, as long as Mr. Adey takes on board the concerns that have been expressed not only by myself but also through Mr. Pearley's correspondence, especially his the memo he put out yesterday, Mike. I know it's only 2 more sleeps.
We won't
There's
comment
huge
on this.
pages, and unfortunately I have not read it.
Yeah. No, but you can live with this. We won't,
I can live with these recommendations.
Yeah.
okay, right. You're all happy? You can live with them? Righto.
so can I move those?
Yeah, but we need to get it. Oh, we've got it up, Mark. Crikey, the technology's amazing.
Cancel.
We've made some minor. Yeah. We could just about. It's pretty simplistic, really. No. I think that was a good compromise, guys. While we're doing that,
Can we, I would also, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to move that we adopt recommendations 1 through 6
yeah,
and 14 and 15.
thank you. Appreciate that. So while we're waiting, we have a mover for 1 to 6, and over the page, what was that, Tom? 14 and 15. Do we have a seconder? All those in favour of adopting those recommendations?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous, and we'll come back to the changes of Tutera Forest.
Oops. All gates struck again.
No, that's right. Okay, then, can you point out the changes?
So we have number 9 is deleted.
Number 9 is deleted.
Region appeal consultants to the tenders committee.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then harvesting and
Yeah.
admin to 13.
Yeah.
That's it.
So
That's it. Do we, everyone's aware of the changes? Do we have a mover? Move and second. All those in favour of the resolution as stands? Aye. You're against?
No, I can live with this, but seriously, Chair, I mean, we've got a bloody good forestry team in this council. We had a speech last night which started, when the council walked into the room, we were always distrustful of them. And then you've got to build up your reputation, etc. We get good advice from a very good, solid forestry component of expertise in this council, and it beggars belief to think that we just disregard that and we have to go somewhere else to find something. The experts actually reside in the building. They deal with all these forestry issues on a daily basis. They understand how it works. They have to, if you like, do the clean-up stuff. I get that we want to have a bigger picture, and we would have got that if we'd stuck to the original recommendations, in my view. However, I can live with this, but guys, why do we always distrust our own staff? It's ridiculous.
Councillor, I don't think it's an issue of trust, it's an issue of... Yeah,
Chair, are you still taking...
Yeah, we will take...
Well, I mean, I wouldn't have spoken to this, but I just disagree with Councillor Wilson's approach. It's not distrusting staff. We're doing our job, actually. It's the concerns out there about an issue. I think we've reached a reasonable position, and I'd just like to assure staff that it's not about distrusting. It's about how can we add value to the situation and bring to the table the community concerns.
Thank you. I think we reached a very... Do you want to speak, Councillor? Yeah, certainly. Off you go. No, off you go.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Mr. Adey for bringing this paper to us, and I know it must be incredibly frustrating when ex-staff members start meddling in management issues, but I think that we've come to a pretty pleasing conclusion, and the overall emphasis from around the table is that there's a huge amount of passion for the outcomes for Lake Tuterra. So thank you for what you've brought to us today.
Can I just say, Chair, that I agree with Councillor Curtin's comments that it's not about the staff. It's not about the. It's just that I had more questions than information that was presented to us at the Environment Service Committee. I went and sought the advice of someone who I trust, who has got expertise in this field, and that's why I brought that back to the council to consider. And I'm pleased with the where we've got to on this. Thank you.
There are no other speakers. We'll take a vote on that now. I think we already have. Are you voting? So it's a unanimous vote. Sorry? Aye. All those in favour? Aye. All those against? It's unanimous. Let's stop for a cup of tea.